As a reporter, I have a confession to make. I should have pushed harder earlier for more information about Joe Biden's mental and physical well-being and any signs of decline. What I would say is, well, there's no obvious evidence that he's declining. Yeah, he moves a little slower, he talks a little slower, but there's no evidence that he's declining. And the White House and the people around Joe Biden were absolutely adamant that suggesting anything, asking the question about whether he was in some physical, mental, or both decline was offensive. How could you? It's age shaming. And I think that impacted me. The reason that I bring this up is in the last 48 hours, there have been two stories, one by the New York Times and one by the Wall Street Journal, that document the decline of Joe Biden.
The mainstream media is finally able to admit that the worst kept secret in American politics, which of course is Joe Biden's obvious mental decline, is in fact true. But remember, for years, the political pundits, the talking heads, they all swore that Joe Biden was the best he's ever been. He's at the top of his game, and they all ran cover for him. But after a disastrous performance against Donald Trump in the debates, they quickly ushered him out of the room, ushered him out of the race, and replaced him with Kamala Harris. Okay, so we all know how that went. But apparently the only person on the left who recognized this at the time was George Clooney, right? But now here we are after the election, after the dramatic loss of Kamala Harris, and we can finally say open and clearly that yes, Joe Biden is mentally unfit, and everyone can get on board with that. So what I want to talk about today, of course, is Scott Jennings absolutely destroying a CNN panel on the fact that they kept this hidden, kept it secret for so long. But before we get to the clips, please like and comment on this video so we can break through the algorithms. Here we go.
Signs of the president's decline arose just months into his term. Quote, administration officials noticed that the president became tired if meetings went too long and would make mistakes. They issued a directive to some powerful lawmakers and allies seeking one-on-one time. Those exchanges should be short and focused, according to the people who received the messages directly from White House aides. If the president was having an off day, meetings would be scrapped altogether. Scott Jennings, you were just talking about this, so I'll go to you first because I know you have a lot to say, but this piece does show Biden having all of these sort of walls up.
Yeah.
And the walls kept getting higher and higher as the years went on.
This is the biggest scandal in America. And the level and volume of people who dedicated themselves to lying to everyone at home about this man's condition for 4 straight years up through this summer is breathtaking. It's a scandal of epic proportions, and it's a fair question to ask. Who is running the country? Who has been running the country? And as I said earlier, if you're worried about Donald Trump's advisors having influence, for the last 4 years, apparently this president, duly elected, but this president was not capable of fulfilling the duties of the office. And his staff and the White House lied about it and kept it from the American people. It's an absolute scandal.
Look, I'll say 2 things. One is that I think Joe Biden, despite all this, had a very successful tenure. You may disagree, but I think on policy as a Democrat, he had a very successful 4 years. But there's a bigger problem here, and that is that I think Democrats are at the point where Republicans might have been right after the Bush election or after the Bush term was up, which is that I think Democrats are starting to mistrust their institutions. And this goes back to a bipartisan effort to lie us into the Iraq War, not just by George Bush, but also by a lot of Democrats. It has to do with the fact that Barack Obama did not hold anybody accountable after the 2008 crisis, which also happened in George Bush's watch, but he became president. He never threw a hostage on the tarmac from Wall Street. You saw the rise of Bernie Sanders as a result of that, and you saw a lot of institutional Democrats, me included, saying, no, 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 this is not the time. We have to stick with the institution. And I think you have a lot of Democrats now, me included, who are pretty sick of the institution and trusting people in the institution. And this is just one example, most recent example, I think, of people institutionally lying to the American people. And what you're ultimately going to see, and I don't have a problem saying this as a Democrat, is that you're going to see a Tea Party version rise up in the Democratic Party based on the fact that this is yet another marker of people just not trusting our leaders anymore. And I'm sorry to say that, but I think we brought this on ourselves.
Yeah, even after that disastrous debate on this network, there were some people being like, oh, he had a bad night. he had a bad night. You know, and one of the quotes in that Wall Street Journal piece was, you know, there are good days and bad days. Today's a bad day. We'll deal with this tomorrow. The problem is tomorrow never came. It was just one bad day after another. And this kind of shielding President Biden, lying to the American people, telling them, don't believe your lying eyes, is yet another reason why President Trump was so successful. Because people just don't trust what they're being told. When they see clearly there was a decline in President Biden, and you're told, don't believe your own lying eyes, nothing to see here, people go, all right, what else are they lying to us about?
He also, in this lame duck period, has... I mean, look, we talk about all the time how Democrats ran on Trump being a threat to democracy, but
I've got nothing for you. I got no excuses for certainly. I think all of America sees what's going on here. I will say I was at the White House this week for a Christmas party, and Joe Biden talked for about 10 minutes. He cracked some jokes, and he was pretty lucid, and it was a good. But it certainly was not prepared, in my opinion, to run the country. I do think we need to go back to the conversation that was happening on the campaign trail, and that's about age limits. I think we've got to start figuring out what that looks like. Boardrooms that have billions and billions and billions of dollars of investor money does that. And I know we talk about voters need to have the right, you know, the opportunity to cast those votes. But I do think age limits in that position, it is the most demanding job anybody's ever held in their entire life.
I'm not for age limits because I do think voters, that's something you can easily discern. And people were discerning that when they were turning against Joe Biden. I just have to ask when the accountability is going to come for every single person who sat in front of a television, who held some position of responsibility and lied their rear end off about what they were seeing behind closed doors. People came on television and said, oh, I'm with him all day, and he's really engaged, and he's doing the job, and he's running circles around us, and these videos are cheap fakes, and on and on and on. Brazen lying by people who work for our government, and they lied to us about it.
What do you have in mind in terms of accountability?
I don't know, but if I were in Congress or I were the incoming administration, I would be thinking about, because I agree with you on institutional trust. I think there is a lack of trust across the board. It's happening in your party. It's been happening in my party. How do you ever regain trust if there's no accountability for the people who lied us into the deficit in the first place? My question is this. We elect people for a reason. The elected leadership of the government is supposed to be making decisions. For 4 years, the unelected have been in charge of our country during critical moments. We don't live in a country where the unelected are supposed to rule us. We live where the elected are supposed to rule. My problem is for 4 years we were lied to about who's actually running the country. This is a problem.
That, of course, is the biggest and most important point. With Joe Biden's obvious mental decline, who's been running the country? Who has been in charge? Who has made these decisions, like the disastrous pullout in Afghanistan, the wide open borders policy, billions sent to Ukraine, right? Who is the one actually making these decisions? Because if they're not elected, then they're not accountable to the people, which is not the way our government is supposed to run. But I love the way how Julie Radzinski, Democrat strategist, actually comes out and says, hey, we did this to ourselves, right? We shot ourselves in the foot. You had to have a loyalty test to Joe Biden's mental health, right? He was the best. He was with it. He was sharp. He was cogent. He could run rings around everyone half his age, okay? But none of that, of course, was true. And now all of that is finally being copped to by the mainstream media, all right? Not that it really matters, because we've all known about this for years. We all saw it with our own eyes, but they tried to gaslight. They tried to make us feel like we were crazy for noticing something that was right in front of our faces, okay? And I'm glad this is finally being pointed out. There has to be some type of consequence. Otherwise, people just continue to lose faith in their institutions. And Democrats, as was also pointed out there, are starting to come to the point that Republicans hit many decades ago, right? We no longer trust the institutions because all they care about is themselves. All they care about is power and lining their own pockets. That's it. And I actually find it laughable that a couple of these Democrats on the panel are willing to come out and say that, yes, Joe Biden did a good job, actually, right? He had some consequential legislation. He had a positive impact on America, right? But as was just revealed, he had little to no impact on any of that. He was checked out. He was on the beach in Martha's Vineyard, right? He was on vacation for nearly a quarter of his presidency, all right? Oh, but someone out there is pulling the strings and they're making really good decisions. Yeah, that just happened to lead to huge inflation, world instability, and of course, a rise in crime in this country. But of course, that's what you get regardless when you have the leftists in control. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and stay safe out there, people, because they're coming after you.